This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. And let's start with a look at the markets. Now, stock markets globally held near record highs today as investors prepare to recalculate their bets on the back of U.S. jobs data, which is expected to come out today. Emerging market shares inched higher towards six-week highs as we saw gains in most parts of Asia offsetting declines elsewhere. South Africa's JSE All Share was weaker as well today. Most indices were down, with industrials and financials falling over 1%. But we did see the resource index inching up slightly, up by almost 1% on the day. Now, also coming up on today's show. The Democratic Republic of Congo seeks compensation after a leak from neighboring Angola's biggest diamond mine. Zimbabwe surpasses its 2020 target in tobacco sales. And a local ride-hailing app ventures out in South Africa, defying the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo is seeking compensation after a leak from neighboring Angola's biggest diamond mine. 12 people died and over 4,500 fell sick in the southern DRC following a tailings leak from the Katoka diamond mine in Angola in July. Now, Congolese Environmental Minister Yves Bazaiba said the country will seek reparations in line with the polluter pays principle, but the amount is yet to be specified. Kasai Provincial Governor Diodion PM banned people from drinking water and eating fish from the Shikapa River after that spill. Sociedad Minera de Katoka, which manages the mine that produces about 75% of Angola's diamonds, did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
We have about 968,973 residents directly or indirectly affected. Then there is 161,490 families affected. And then we have 4,502 cases of declared diarrhea. At this stage, 12 deaths have been recorded in the health zone of Bandaluka in the Ilebo territory. From the 31st of July, the residents of Kasai, the ones living in Shikapa and from Kamonia and downstream, noticed the dead fish, lots of fish, tons of dead fish floating on the river, and it attracted everyone's attention. And then the first reflex was to take the fish. The fact that the Angolan government recognized what happened at Katoka and that Katoka mining also recognized the spill, for us it is good. Now we're at the assessment stage. I can't give you the costs now because of the limitations of my mission, which was sampling, research and such.
And earlier we spoke to our correspondent in the DRC, Chris Ochambringa, for more on the story.
I spoke to an official at the Angolan embassy in the DRC earlier today, and he said that they are fully aware of the severity of this disaster and that the Angolan government is currently holding talks with their counterparts in the DRC to see how to resolve this matter amicably. The mining firm, Katoka, admitted that this incident happened. Last week they said it was an accident, but the DRC authorities, the Minister of Environment, says that admission is good, but it's not enough. They need to compensate them. They're saying 12 people died and more than 4,000 others fell sick. There was a lot of fish that died in that river, Kasai, and so they want some compensation. Now, the government of the DRC says they're sending a team of experts from the Ministry of Environment and other scientists to go to that area to see how to resolve this matter so that the people can be compensated. The official I spoke to did not want to divulge the exact actions that the Angolan government will take, but they said they are fully aware of the seriousness of this matter and that they will find a solution with the DRC authorities.
Well, let's now head to Ethiopia, where the government announced that it has collected $682 million from its mining sector for the just concluded 2020 and 2021 fiscal year. Now, the Horn of Africa nation generated more than 9,300 kilograms of gold during the period and projects revenue from the sector will grow to $1 billion in the next financial year. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more from Addis Ababa.
The mining sector's success for Ethiopia in the just concluded fiscal year came from the supply of over 9,384 kilograms of gold to the National Bank of Ethiopia and the mining of gemstones including tantalum and opal. And out of that transaction, $682 million has been garnered. In the first 10 months of the current fiscal year alone, Ethiopia has earned around $505 million from the gold mining. Mining has created close to 100,000 jobs for citizens this year alone. And this has been achieved through the establishment of several gold trading centers, which Ethiopia is seeking to boost its income from the industry and at the same time curb the smuggling of minerals and the related trade. Gold is now the highest foreign currency earning export commodity for Ethiopia. And according to the Minister of Mines and Petroleum, Takala Uma, in the last 2 months, gemstones export has grown by nearly 30% compared to last year's earnings. The minister also announced Ethiopia's plan of generating more than $1 billion from the mining of gold alone in the next fiscal year. Grumtala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, in Zimbabwe, more than 200 million kilograms of tobacco worth almost $600 million have been sold during the country's tobacco marketing season that is coming to a close. From Harare, here's Farai Makutuya with the details.
14.3% more tobacco has been delivered this year compared to 2020. The value of the crop is 27.72% higher than the $457 million realized last year, with prices firmer by 12%.
We have surpassed our target. Our target initially was 200 million, but as you can see, we are now actually at 208, and we might end up at around 212 million kilograms.
While that's a welcome growth at a macro level, there are concerns that the majority of small-scale farmers are getting the short end of the stick due to onerous repayment obligations.
These guys don't have cash. They don't have access to long-term capital, so they get contractors to actually, give them the inputs, right? And then the contractors really decide how much they pay these guys, right? So despite the increase in volumes, the amount of cash that actually goes to the growers is very little.
Authorities are taking steps to address this.
I can tell you that for this season, the government has unveiled a $60 million facility in a bid to try to localize funding of production, and most of our growers will be able to access that money directly from the banks, and we believe it will actually reduce the cost of production and improve the grower viability.
Government has ambitions to grow tobacco into a $5 billion industry, which will involve not just increasing the amount of tobacco that is grown, but also processing it in order to enhance its value.
We need to minimize foreign money coming into the country and buying raw goods. Rather, let that foreign money come and buy finished goods.
A crop of 250 million kilograms has been projected for the 2022 season. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And in South Africa, maize farmers say they expect output to rise in the 2020-2021 season, and that's compared with the previous season, thanks to an increase in area planted and favorable weather conditions. That's according to the government's Crop Estimates Committee. Here's Angelo Coppola with more.
The Crop Estimates Committee says that the 2021 maize harvest will be 16.316 million tonnes, up 6.6% from the 15.3 million tonnes harvested last season.
What this means is that as a country, we will remain a net exporter of maize. We estimate that exports could be around about 2.6 million tonnes or so. That's slightly below the previous marketing season. The reason being that the demand in Southern Africa region is relatively weak. Because everybody is having a good crop, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and the whole Southern Africa region.
The bumper crop is also good news for consumers, despite a recent hike in food price inflation.
Food prices have been rising over the past few months, with inflation hitting 7% in June, which was the highest level since 2014. But obviously that was not driven more by the domestic supply constraints, rather the global dynamics. But going forward, as the global picture hopefully will change, it will also influence positively the conditions domestically.
And prospects for the next season are looking very positive.
The tractor sales, as one of the important indicators, have been growing by double digits in South Africa since about mid-2020 coming into this year. And secondly, the weather forecast is also painting a positive picture. Prospects of a weak La Nina, which means that for the Southern Africa region, we could receive again above normal rainfall. And obviously this is going to add on already a season that was a La Nina one, which means that the soil moisture is really at a good levels across the Southern Africa region, and obviously in the South Africa side.
The increase in output by South African maize farmers is good news for security in terms of food and also for export to other markets in the region. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And now look at some corporate headlines today. South Africa's telecoms companies are now trying to settle a wireless spectrum auction dispute with the industry regulator out of court to avoid a prolonged legal battle. Now, South African market leaders Vodacom and MTN have long called for more spectrum in order to expand their data services and boost their revenue. And the plan was approved in October last year after years of delays. Meanwhile, Safaricom Telkom's Ethiopia operations has announced a countrywide staff recruitment drive and introduced its leadership team. Safaricom conveyed the shareholders' commitment to investment in Ethiopia and vision to contribute to the achievement of the Digital Ethiopia objectives. Now, the company is set to recruit about 450 graduates over the next 3 years into the Discover Graduate Management Program. And Apple is delaying a system that will have scanned customers' photos for signs of child sex abuse after fierce criticism from privacy advocates, who of course fear it could set the stage for other forms of tracking. Now, Apple has said it will take additional time over the coming months to collect input and make improvements before releasing these critically important child safety features. And South Korea's Hyundai Motor Company, together with affiliate Kia, plans to internally develop a silicon carbide technology-based power chip for one of its upcoming vehicles next year. Of course, a shortage of chips fueled by pandemic interruptions and production issues at chip factories have now forced automakers to halt production and reduce work shifts. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Business conditions in Kenya's private sector economy improve for a fourth straight month. And banks and financial institutions in Tunisia announce measures to help small businesses recover from the pandemic-related losses.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche Okoronkwo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place. even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, business conditions in Kenya's private sector economy improved for fourth straight month in August. The rate of growth picked up as firms saw a faster expansion in new business. Job creation also strengthened, but output did rise at the slowest rate in 4 months, and business confidence fell to a near record low. Now, the headline figure is derived from Stanbic Kenya's Purchasing Managers Index. In August, the headline PMI picked up to 51.1 from 50.6 in July, but it did remain above that 50-point neutral mark, signaling an improvement in business conditions. Well, let's now get more insight into those numbers. We are joined by Kuria Kamau, who is a fixed income and currency strategist at Stanbic Bank. Great to have you with us today, Mr. Kamau. Now, looking at your findings, Kenya has certainly seen the pace of a recovery in its business conditions accelerating, and that's across most key sectors. But what did your research reveal about what was driving that? And big question, why is the manufacturing sector excluded from that recovery?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. So 3 things contributed to that rise in business conditions here in Kenya. The first, of course, was higher demand. And in that, we saw an increase in the level of domestic demand and also export demand. On the domestic side, as you correctly pointed out, we saw 4 out of the 5 major sectors that we track witness an increase except manufacturing. I'll get to the reasons for that in a minute. And on the export side, we saw an improvement in demand from clients, particularly from those clients from the Middle East and also from Europe. The reason why we saw that slowdown, or rather a slower increase in the level of demand in the manufacturing sector, is just driven by the fact that inflation remains high and consumer demand continues to remain fairly weak. The second reason that contributed to that increase in business conditions that we saw was, of course, an increase in the level of purchases. And finally, we also saw an improvement in staffing levels, as you correctly pointed out. Thanks.
Now, we also noted that while business conditions did improve, business confidence fell to a near record low. Given that we haven't seen those COVID-19 restrictions become more stringent than they were 2 months ago, why the drop in business confidence?
Yeah, so as you correctly pointed out, the 12-month outlook continues to be fairly low. And you can, as a business, you can imagine that a few challenges when trying to look into the future. The first, of course, is how are things going to play out with regards to new variants of COVID-19? They talk about a new variant, the mu variant, which doesn't seem to be responding to the vaccines. So as a business, that could affect the level of demand that your company could see. The second thing that also is proving a challenge for a lot of these businesses is how is the government going to respond to this? Are we going to see more public health restrictions? Are they going to get more stringent in the next couple of months? So that's something else that's worth looking out for. And, you know, as a business, you're trying to decide, is this the new normal, or are we going to go back to how things were before COVID? So as a business, you're trying to decide and weigh all these different things and look to the future. And therefore, it's proving very difficult and continues. And that's the reason why we're seeing business confidence remain fairly low.
Now, looking forward, you also mentioned that increases in input and, of course, output prices, that could support demand going forward. So give us a sense of what are some of the most important factors that could impact a sustainable recovery going forward.
Of course, I think the biggest thing continues to be COVID-19 and how things play out. What we're seeing across the world is the fact countries that are doing very well with regards to vaccine rollout seem to be recovering a lot faster. So I think vaccination levels ideally would lead to an improvement. But overall, if prices remain stable, it allows for the demand to recover more sustainably. And finally, if you look into the most recent report, I think a few things kind of make us believe that we could see an improvement. First, the level of backlogs have increased, but we're seeing companies begin to hire more, begin to purchase more raw materials, which seems to suggest that they're anticipating a recovery in overall demand and therefore will begin to produce enough to meet that demand.
Quite a positive outlook there. But many thanks for your insights there. That, of course, is Kuria Kamau. He is a fixed income and currency strategist at Stanbic Bank. And moving on now, banks and financial institutions in Tunisia have reacted to the call by authorities to reduce interest rates and to support small and medium enterprises, and that's following the COVID-19 downturn. Now, the bankers also said they will allocate close to $60 million, or about 2% of the total gross surplus collected last year, as a part of their social responsibility. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
The Tunisian Professional Association of Banks and Financial Institutions has announced new measures in favor of the national economy and Tunisian citizens who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The announcement follows their late July meeting with Tunisian president, who called on the representatives of financial institutions to lower their interest rates applied by banks.
These measures relate to the application of a maximum interest rate equal to MMR plus 2 on new short-term loans excluding overdrafts for a maximum period of 1 year to enable Tunisian SMEs to cope with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, resume their activity and preserve jobs.
The Tunisian Professional Association of Banks and Financial Institutions said it will allocate 160 million dinars, or around $58 million, as part of its social responsibility to help the pandemic-battered North African state's economy.
This amount is about 2% of the total gross surplus collected by all banks and financial institutions during the year 2020. It will be allocated to the state fund.
During their meeting, Tunisia's head of state called for the bankers to consider Tunisian citizens who have borne the brunt of the pandemic. President Kais Saied welcomed this series of economic and social measures from the financial institutions.
I thank you for the measures you've taken and the amounts you've allocated, 160 million dinars. Today, at this historic moment, you are contributing to this fight. We are standing together on the same front for Tunisia.
The banking and financial sector has also committed to pay the conjunctural social aid financed by the World Bank as part of the national effort against the COVID-19 pandemic without the deduction of commission. According to the Tunisian Professional Association of Banks and Financial Institutions, the $58 million allocation will be dedicated to supporting the education and health sectors in the country, including $18 million for the start of the new school year, which commences next week. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And moving on now, foreign invested financial institutions are playing an increasingly large role in China's securities markets. They are taking advantage of government policies, opening the domestic financial sector to foreign firms. They're also providing more opportunities to local investors, as Zhang Xishuan now reports.
Having been doing business in China for 14 years, Fullerton became the first Singapore-based asset management company to be granted the RMB Qualified Foreign Institutional Investor status and approved for dealing on the China interbank bond market in 2014. With its wholly foreign-owned entity in Shanghai, the company launched its first equity private fund in China in 2018. Since then, it has been offering services to not just overseas clients, but also to domestic investors. And it's been good business. Its investments have seen an annualized return rate of 14.6%, and the company is looking forward to more.
The A-share market is behaving quite reasonably, and as the Chinese economy continues to grow, Listed companies have high-quality assets with large profit capabilities and potentials. And since the outbreak, China's overall monetary policy has remained relatively loose. So we're optimistic about the mainland stock market and the bond market as well.
The growing market is showing it's attractive to plenty of newcomers as well. JP Morgan has just announced that the regulator has given it the green light to take complete ownership of JP Morgan Securities China from its 4 Chinese shareholders, making it the first foreign firm to fully own a securities venture here. The company says that China represents one of the largest opportunities in the world for many of its clients and for itself, and it will also help Chinese companies grow internationally. These developments not only highlight the enthusiasm for foreign financial institutions for operating in China, but also reflect Chinese regulators' resolve to advance financial liberalization. In recent years, more than 100 foreign invested banks and insurance, securities, payment, and clearing institutions have been approved and set up here. They've been actively expanding the scope of financial businesses, especially since the Chinese government scrapped foreign ownership limits on securities firms and mutual funds last year.
We help companies with their business registration, location choices, and recruitment. We are working on spreading information about our policies so as to let overseas firms better understand us and strengthen their confidence in operating here.
Experts say the arrival of the foreign invested financial institutions will bring more diversified financial derivative products and businesses to the mainland market, accelerating its upgrading and internationalization, but at the same time potentially putting pressure on domestic firms.
Domestic firms are good at serving local firms, raising money domestically. In terms of business transactions, due to their lack of retail channels and their lower commissions, overseas firms will probably avoid competing with local firms in traditional retail business transactions and credit trading. But they will present great challenges to local firms in serving high-end or high-net-worth clients.
In the first half of this year, overseas investors increased their holdings of yuan-denominated bond by over 450 billion yuan, up 40% year-on-year. And a State Council executive meeting in July announced that China's financial liberalization will continue. Regulations on cross-border transactions between parent and subsidiary firms will be improved, and there are to be more ways opened for foreign capital to participate in domestic financial markets. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come. We take a look at some of the technologies on display at the Trade and Services Fair in Beijing. And an 80-year-old single malt whiskey goes on auction in London.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
And now a look at other headlines this hour. 5 of the 73 students kidnapped on Wednesday by unknown gunmen in Nigeria's northwest Zamfara state are now free. Nigerian authorities say they are still trying to rescue the remaining students as well as hunt down the criminals behind the attack. Now, every hour, 26 Africans die of COVID-19 in the continent's third wave of infections. That's according to the World Health Organization's Africa Director. The WHO warned that Africa is likely to miss the global goal of vaccinating the most vulnerable 10% of every country's population against COVID-19 by the end of this month. And tensions over shrinking resources are now fueling displacement in Somalia, according to the United Nations Humanitarian Affairs Office. The country's climate crisis has been worsening current conflicts and contributing to new ones. And finally, more than 40 South Sudanese medics have graduated after completing their 3-month medical Chinese language courses in Juba. The graduates include doctors, nurses, and midwives. And that's a recap of other headlines this hour. Now, Friday marked the first day of the largest international fair for trade and services. The event is being held in the Chinese capital, Beijing, and will run until Tuesday. It is the second installment of the fair in China. This year's theme is focused on the digital future and service-driven development. Chinese President Xi Jinping addressed the opening ceremony on a Thursday, and he made some important announcements in his video speech, including more support for small and medium-sized enterprises, reforms to one of China's key trading systems, and the launch of a new stock exchange on the Chinese mainland. Well, let's now get more context from Hannah Ryder. She's the CEO of Development Reimagined. It is an international development consultancy and the first Kenyan wholly foreign-owned enterprise in Beijing. Great to have you with us on the show today. Now, this event is meant to foster an environment of international cooperation and certainly provide opportunities for access to China's service industry as well, as we see the country further opening up its key service sectors. So how significant has this event been for African businesses?
Well, I think we have to put this in the context of Chinese trade and African trade. While trade between Africa and China has been rising significantly over the last 20 years, not much has been focused on services. So I think this is an area for significant growth. There are, numbers, more and more African firms like mine who are based in China, and more Chinese firms and investors who are interested and investing in African countries and service sectors in African countries, in particular financial services and also digital services. However, more can be done, and so this is a great opportunity for African firms to market our services and what our markets look like.
Well, speaking of digital services, cross-border e-commerce, especially in Africa, has become a new growth point, and it's also one for international trade going forward. How have you seen this year's event pushing forward innovation-driven cooperation?
Yes, I think it's very, very, very important. E-commerce, especially in a post-COVID-19 world or a COVID-19 world you were just covering, we do need to be using e-commerce much more than we have done in the past, and we should utilize this opportunity. As you mentioned, however, again, in the African continent, much of the e-commerce growth has been driven by African firms and also other international firms. Chinese firms are getting involved, and we are certainly, for instance, my firm has had interest from a number of e-commerce platforms in marketing African products, value-added African products in China. So this is definitely a growing, a growing area. However, again, the forums like this provide a great opportunity to make clear what the challenges are also that African firms and also Chinese firms are facing in trying to move these things forward. Where you have, for instance, announcement of more support for small and medium enterprises, where you have announcements and kind of specific initiatives which are focused on those and also focused on, for instance, the African region, that will be of great support.
Now, we are also seeing China sort of growing its commitment to addressing climate change, low carbon transformation, and of course, green development. But how do you see, or how did this event sort of put forward the service sector at this year's event approach? How do they approach this? And what do you think African businesses can learn from how they're approaching it?
Yeah. Well, this is also an issue from the African side, which is very important. We've been working with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa in looking at a environmental assessment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And that also obviously doesn't just cover trade in goods, it covers trade in services. And in that sense, for instance, how environmentally friendly transport is, or how environmentally friendly tourism is absolutely crucial. So, for example, with CIFTIS, in terms of if we're looking at tourism and services, tourism as an area of services, promoting ecotourism, China's experience in ecotourism is obviously very important, very useful, and again, these are useful opportunities for African businesses to understand even better, to learn from, and to try to continue to promote, including to Chinese tourists as well.
Well, many thanks. We do have to leave it there. Thank you for your insights. That, of course, is Hannah Ryder. She's the CEO of Development Reimagined. Still on the event, the digital sphere is taking off across sectors from tourism to security and even elderly care. Well, this year's China International Fair for Trade and Services showcased how digitalization will hit virtually every aspect of our lives going forward. Here's CGTN Sunir reporting.
This is no regular aisle. This one says I'm perfect in my speed, in my balance, in my gait.
It's easily one of the most popular walks at the Service Trade Fair, and it's digitally enhanced and tailored for the elderly.
It gathers relevant info with 3D sensing and then compares notes with the database. The results will help to dole out more to-the-point nursing care plans.
The company is bringing 8 digital solutions to the fair, including ones that will upgrade highway maintenance. Qianxing is showing how it plans to provide digital security for the 2022 Winter Olympic Games. And the Palace Museum, perhaps China's most venerable establishment, is also getting in touch with its digital side.
And in the Digital Palace Museum, you can go into places that you're not normally allowed to and look really closely.
720,000 square meters of the Palace Museum have been captured in full 3D and are now available online. You can enjoy the whole Palace Museum from the comfort of your home. But it's all about better cultural preservation. Cultural heritage sites face all kinds of unforeseen damages, so it's crucial that we keep digital records of the relics.
And with that, even the 600-year-old palace has stepped into a digital future. So yeah, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, let's move on now. A key issue for farmers in the U.S. and indeed around the world in recent years has been labor shortages, from fruit pickers to highly skilled combined and tractor operations. But a solution, at least in part, could soon be at hand, with autonomous vehicles starting to make a push into the marketplace. Here's CGTN's Dan Williams reporting.
It might look like a futuristic runaway cart, but this could soon be a common sight across the countryside. An autonomous vehicle pulling a lot of weight that would otherwise fall to farm hands. The company behind the innovation, Raven Industries, also has an option to turn a regular tractor into an autonomous one.
We hear across the globe labor issues, and it's worse in some places than others, but it's an issue almost every customer we talk to. It allows for a purely autonomous operation, either from the corner of the field and someday even the office away from the field.
Many major agricultural manufacturers are making moves into the autonomous market, while elements of artificial intelligence have already been implemented on some products on display at this year's Farm Progress Show in Illinois, including John Deere combines.
A farmer makes thousands of decisions every minute for grain quality, yield, improving yield, et cetera, to get the right sample. The artificial intelligence is really using technology to make some of those decisions, adjust the combine based on the output, what the operator expects the grain quality to be.
One technology already widely adopted by farmers is use of imaging drones to highlight problem areas. But Rantizo is a drone company that can now precision target just those problem areas for chemical treatment.
This is a much lighter touch on the field and able to get to the hard to reach places. We can come in and spot spray where it wouldn't make sense for a ground rig or an airplane to come spray the whole field. We can apply something precisely where it needs it.
Although this high-tech machinery can demonstrate significant advantages, the question remains as to whether the manufacturers can win over skeptical farmers and turn that potential into hard sales.
You know, it's really important at the end of the day, farmers have a job to do. It has to either help their bottom line, it has to help their top line, it has to help ensure that work gets done.
Farm machinery has changed significantly in the last few decades, with towering machines offering more power and capacity than ever before. But the farm could be set for a further radical overhaul in the coming years. Dan Williams, CGTN, Decatur, Illinois.
Now, Scotland's whiskey maker, Gordon and MacPhail, have unveiled the world's oldest whiskey in London, which is an 80-year-old single malt from Glenlivet Distillery. Now, the estimated auction price tag is between $110,000 and $221,000. The jewel-like decanter and oak pavilion was designed by world-renowned Ghanaian-British architect and designer Sir David Ajayi Obey. Only about 250 special bottles of the whiskey will be available, with decanter number 1 to be auctioned by Sotheby's Hong Kong on October 7th. Proceeds from the auction will be donated to Scottish rewilding charity Trees for Life. And on that note, let's take a look at commodity prices today. Gold rising on the back of a weakening dollar. Of course, investors are looking to the U.S. jobs data to gauge the Fed's plans to, of course, start tapering asset purchases going forward. But traders say for the week, the metal was headed for its first decline in 4. Meanwhile, oil prices largely steady today as a rebound in global demand was widely expected, but a slow recovery for the U.S. Gulf Coast export and refining hub from that hurricane earlier this week did weigh on prices today. Let's now take a short break, still coming up on the show. The bold ride-hailing startup in South Africa that's grown through the coronavirus pandemic.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, a visual artist in Chad's capital, N'Djamena, is breathing life into a used bullet, literally. Apollinaire Guidmbaye is using the spent ammunition as instruments of peace that he is spreading through new art forms. Here's Beryl Oro with his story.
From handgun rounds to 50 caliber shells, nearly all these bullets have seen action. 38-year-old renowned visual artist Apollinaire Guidmbaye, also known as Doff, seeks to give them second lives.
I try to work with spent shells and other war materials to give a rebirth, a metaphor of what shells can do. Instead of war and killing, I use the same shells that have bereaved women to talk about peace as a kind of remission.
Bound together by a wide range of recycled materials, the works have received numerous accolades and have been mainstays in galleries throughout the region and abroad. A tireless collector of miscellaneous objects, Apollinaire Guidmbaye's eyes regularly scan the ground in search of trash he can turn to treasure.
All those who fall during the war, whether on the side of friends or enemies, what do we do with them? Behind these people who die, there are families, widows, orphans who spend their time crying, and this generates other hatred. Today we find child soldiers, street children, children in slavery in all camps. If only their parents had not died in the war, will these children still be forced into child labor?
Electric components, plastic fragments, and rusted machinery have all played prominent roles in his art. But it wasn't until 2016, with his country facing a renewed insurgency, that Guidmbaye began incorporating spent bullets and shells from the battlefield into his art.
To collect the casings and to recover what was used, to do harm and to make of it something beautiful. It is the essence of what comes out of the work of the artist Doff. Clearly, it's a message of peace, a pacifist thought.
The art creates the silhouette of the nameless millions who have died in wars across the Sahel region.
I would say that to transform something that wasn't supposed to be anything anymore, something that is also a symbol of conflict, and give it a new dimension, a new life, these are the things he is able to express through his works.
Since Chad's longtime ruler Idriss Deby was killed in April, the nation has maintained a fragile peace. Guidmbaye says his anti-war message is more relevant than ever, and his ideal audience, he hopes, is one that looks beyond the surface, seeking meaning in the materials he uses and draws parallels in their own lives. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, Somalia's relative stability is attracting Somalis from the diaspora to help in rebuilding the economy. While the economic environment is not as conducive as they would like, they say it is certainly better than what was experienced earlier. While CGTN's Daniela Pearson looks at one returnee who is now reaping from his decision to set up a shop in Mogadishu.
A notable number of the Somali diaspora community are gearing up to return home, following decades of violence and instability in their home country. Mohammed Bashir is one of them. After being forced to leave Mogadishu, he is embarking on his return with an aim of inspiring reforms in Somalia.
If I may paint you a picture of the situation when I fled, the country was in total chaos. We faced political instability and insecurity. It was impossible to work and people hardly slept in their homes. Students were forced to stay home and there was fierce fighting going on. There was fighting on many fronts. You were left with only two options. You either fled from the country or were forced into displacement, particularly from Mogadishu.
Bashir sought refuge in the Netherlands. There, he found the opportunity to learn and develop his skills.
It was possible for me to adapt to the new country, its people and culture. I've learned the language and socialized with people. All these were possible because of my young age. I immediately started pursuing my dream and have got the opportunity to continue with my education. I have learned graphic design.
Conditions in Somalia have slowly returned to normal, aided by the African Union mission in Somalia and the Somali security forces. This kind of change is inspiring those living in the diaspora to return and help in rebuilding their country.
The first thing I had to think about was what I could contribute. So I thought the first thing I could do was serve people with my education and also find an income for myself through it. That was my objective. We started a family business from a simple idea. We started Daos Advertising Agency. When I returned in 2012, many businessmen had to go far for the design of a business card, brochure, or a profile. They had to go to Nairobi or Dubai. What I started with a small room is today a big company with over 30 direct employees. It's not only an advertising agency now. Last year, we also introduced printing.
Analysts say the diaspora contribution to the country has been immensely significant. However, there are still some challenges that hinder the chances of full-scale investment in Somalia.
The biggest challenges that hinder diaspora investment is the lack of certainty in the political future of the country. Since there is political instability, conflicts may arise any time which can cause damage to their property. There is also lack of a proper insurance system that prevents huge investment into the country. There is no guarantee of any return if your property is damaged or you lose your wealth to fire or it sinks in the sea. The other is insecurity in the country. Somalia is not fully secure at the moment.
For returnees like Bashir, they hope to rebuild and develop their communities with the aim of spurring economic growth. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Now, e-hailing services in South Africa have had their fair share of woes with COVID-19 restrictions still in place. The economy has not fully reopened since going into lockdown about 18 months ago. Well, despite this, the number of ride-sharing services have increased in the country. Bold local startup Next Now also took to the streets during this time. And here's CGTN's Julie Shire with more on them.
South African e-hailing startup Next Now braved tough conditions during the COVID-19 lockdown and entered the local market during level 5 restrictions.
It was very difficult because we get our main business comes from a nightlife. People going out to clubs, going out to pubs, going to school, going to work, and at that time no one was going, everyone was like at home, so it was quite difficult. But with that, we actually managed to acquire close to about 2,000 drivers.
It's estimated drivers lost around 75% of their earnings during this time, but several new entrants over the last year have brought hope. Driver Suleto Misikenya lost his job during the lockdown and turned to Next Now.
For me, it was a matter of circumstance. I actually had a job in a completely different industry. It was a desk job like anyone else. Things changed quickly with the pandemic arriving in South Africa. I guess I had to make a plan quickly. I happened to have access to a vehicle, and I heard about this new app. That's how I got here.
Business has remained rocky with many consumers now jobless, but the local operator believes its low pricing model will give it a competitive edge against international rivals such as Uber and Bolt.
We actually understand what drivers want. No, drivers are looking for more commission. Riders, they're actually looking for more incentives and an affordable ride. So we had to match the two to be able to understand. So we came in at a lower price.
It's been a tough year for the South African economy. The e-hailing industry is, however, confident as vaccinations increase and restrictions ease, more people will be on the move again.
Even really before the vaccine started, like let's say, for example, we're on level 4. As soon as we move down to the hybrid level 3, level 4 thing, as soon as we get there already, you can see people pick up activity more. People want to be outside. People don't want to stay indoors for too long.
China's Didi Chuqing is among the new arrivals in this hotly contested space, which is dominated by Uber and Bolt. But Next Now is undeterred, and it has plans to grab a substantial share of the local market and to expand to other African countries. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And let's shift focus now and take a look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand rising 0.3% today, but it did remain largely flat ahead of a closely watched U.S. jobs report that kept the dollar on the back foot today. Kenya's shilling depreciating to a 7-month low against the U.S. dollar, partly hurt by depressed inflows from tourism and tea amid a recovering economy which has pushed up demand for imports. It is at its weakest since February. Well, before we leave you, renowned Swedish pop group ABBA has reunited to release its first new album in 4 decades, and it will do a digital concert in London next year. Now, the album, titled Voyage, will be released on November 5th before a revolutionary set of concerts where virtual avatars will play hits such as Mamma Mia and Waterloo. Now, the group has been creating the holographic live show using motion capture and other techniques. This comes about 50 years after the founding of the group that consisted of 2 married couples for most of its existence. The music has remained popular in the decades since their breakup, in part because of the stage musical Mamma Mia and the 2 films that followed them. Now, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010. Tickets go on sale on September 7th, starting at $30 on the opening night of May.
It's a new tour. Haven't been out there for 40 years.
A new album after 40 years. It is absolutely incredible.
First it was just 2 songs. And then we said, well, maybe we should do, I don't know, a few others. What do you say, girls? And they say, yeah. Then I asked them, well, why don't we just do a whole album?
The first song, I Still Have Faith in You, I knew when Benny played the melody, I just knew it had to be about us.
And of course, we've got to give you a glimpse of the new singles, I Still Have Faith in You and Don't Shut Me Down.
We did, it all comes down to I'm like a dream within a dream that's been decoded. I'm fired up, I'm hot, don't shut me down. I'm not the one you knew, I'm now and then combined. And I'm asking you to have an open mind. I won't be the same, I'm not the same this time around. I'm fired up, don't shut me down.
And on that note, we end today's edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and of course the rest of the team, thanks for watching.